It's not just politics. It's continuing education on life. The Dennis Prager Show. Weekdays at noon on AM 1360 KUIK.
Welcome back, everybody. I'd like to have with us from Cascade Policy Institute, the John Charles. He's going to talk to something you may not be aware of. I know I wasn't. In the new Trump budget, there may be no funding for beloved federal funding for light rail and Amtrak, etc. And I imagine that I thought there'd be marches through the streets of Portland or days of mourning, or they'd close the schools or something over news like this. But John Charles is going to bring us up to date about where this all stands. And hi, John.
Hi, Jane.
So what's the deal on all this? Where does it stand?
Well, we may not have closed schools yet or have marching in the streets, but just give them time. Certainly among the websites and blogs that are used by train nuts, they're exploding over this. According to the Washington Post, the 2018 budget proposal from the Trump administration proposes to go from the 2017 budget of $18.6 billion for the federal transportation down to $16.2 billion, which is a 13% decline. Now, this is seen as catastrophic by, some people. But frankly, compared to the State Department or the Ag Department or EPA, this is a fairly modest cut among the discretionary spending choices. Specifically, it proposes to shift air traffic control outside the government, which is a good idea. That should have been done a long time ago. Yep. It eliminates funding for many new transit projects and support for long-distance Amtrak trains. Well, that's also a good idea because whatever value those modes have, they should be paid for entirely by people who ride them, not taxpayers.
Right.
It also eliminates $175 million in subsidies for commercial flights to rural airports. And I have nothing against rural folks, but some of those subsidies are quite egregious on a per ticket or per mile basis. And again, whatever value it has in flights there is in flying to rural airports, that value should be paid by the users. And then finally, it proposes cuts of almost $500 million from the so-called Tiger Grant program, which is a boondoggle that subsidizes all kinds of road and transit projects, which should be paid for locally. And that's really the whole lesson out of this, is that almost all travel by any mode is predominantly local, and the benefits from that travel accrue locally. And therefore, the cost associated with all those trips, whether bike or airline or driving or freight, whatever, the cost should be paid by those benefiting from the trip, not by taxpayers 3,000 miles away.
Yeah, and because Amtrak isn't a big thing here up in the Northeast corridor and stuff, that's a real hot thing, because a lot of people do use it there, and of course it is, as you say, subsidized, but it is a huge money loser out here, and has been subsidized for a long time. Where's the money going to go?
You mean the money saved in Trump's budget?
Yes.
Oh, well, it'll go to, the big dogs in the budget are things you can't even touch. He can't escape. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. The Pentagon will get a big increase. Some other agencies will. But, I don't have any control over that. My point is, when it comes to transportation, we have to get over this feeling that there's a Santa Claus back in D.C. and that we as travelers are entitled to get really fun stuff that we like paid for by everybody else. No, stop it. If we want to build a new light rail line, then it should be paid for locally. You want to fly? Fine, pay the full fare. And by cutting off these goofy subsidies, you will instantly impose fiscal discipline on people, and the dumbest projects will drop off the list. We'll get back to building and operating things that are actually worth doing.
Yeah, and the idea, the word boondoggle comes to mind with a lot of these projects, and we've been the mecca for it here in the Pacific Northwest, and most notably Oregon, Portland. And people need to remember, as we talk about not just, these kinds of, they're going to call it cuts and taking progress away, and that real people who use alternative forms of transportation are the true heroes of our time because they're not using their cars as much, et cetera, et cetera. The fact is that if we do want, and I certainly do, want to cut income taxes, want to cut down the, it's going to have to come from somewhere, because in the long run, that will benefit the economy and everybody in general, and more jobs will be created when the government takes less out of everybody's hide. And that's the price of some of these little projects that are just, they're all, we all have our version of the big dig, and in Oregon, it's transportation is definitely high on the list. Right.
Plus, people need to remember there's nothing that stops state and local governments from continuing boondoggles. Their Amtrak was forced to offload short line trips years ago. So if you want to take what you think of as the Amtrak train, the Cascades from Portland to Eugene, you can get on it. You may think it's Amtrak, but no, it's paid for by the state of Oregon. And the one-way subsidy is $118 per boarding. That's not Trump's budget. That's local money, and Governor Brown is proposing another $8.7 million in the next 2-year budget to keep the subsidies going. Well, that's another subsidy that should be killed off. But frankly, she's probably going to get the money. We'll continue to have this little ghost ship going from Portland to Eugene, but at least taxpayers in New Jersey and Oklahoma can say they're not being ripped off. That's Oregon foolishness.
Right. So it's a local decision to make, and then the local politicians have to be held accountable for that, especially when they're crying poor mouth on everything else.
Right. So and they're a lot more accountable than someone in Congress.
Right. And we really have come to the point, I've heard people say, well, that's federal money. It's like free money. Well, yeah, if you don't pay federal taxes.
Right. And about 40% of taxpayers don't actually pay federal taxes. So from their standpoint, I do understand the logic, but if we don't get it, somebody else does. That's just free money.
Yeah, you hear that all the time, and I think we may have even a higher percentage of those people who don't pay any federal taxes here in Oregon. So it's frustrating because it's real money, and everybody complains about the blow of the government, except those that are getting. Right. Are dependent on it for everything, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to get a lot of backlash, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, 2 weeks ago, the big backlash was, cuts for national public broadcasting. Well, everyone's got a sacred cow. I understand that, but if you aren't willing to concede anything, if you think that only your sacred cow deserves subsidies, but someone else's sacred cow should get the cut, we're never going to get anywhere as a country. And we're going broke. The country's going broke. The state's going broke. Many cities are going broke. We have to start being adults and understand that if we want things, then we should pay for it. If we're not willing to pay for it, then that probably means it's not worth doing. Now, quit acting like a child.
Yeah, and you can't have it all. And so you have a tantrum and demand everything you want. And if it's something you want and you need, then pay full fare. One of the things was watching this whole airline debacle with United Airlines, and you think about air travel and how miserable it's become. There was a time when air travel was basically a privilege of the wealthy.
Yeah.
Average people didn't get to use it, but because they made it so accessible and basically affordable to people on a very slim margin, we're now forced to stuffed into planes and smaller seats, and we're treated like cattle, and all this stuff is bound to happen inevitably. But comparatively speaking to what airfare used to cost, proportionate to income of the time, we're at Greyhound bus levels. And people, if something there's a price to be paid, and if you don't want to pay it, then you shouldn't be able to use it. And we have to make some decisions about what we really can afford and what we really want. We can't have everything, but that attitude that you can is going to be our undoing. It's going to be interesting, though. I didn't realize that it was that major, and so I always say appreciate the good work at Cascade Policy.
Okay, thanks, Jane.
Thanks, John. Have a good week.
You too.
CascadePolicy.org is the place you go to donate so you can help them continue to do their great work. And it's very important that groups like this are around, because they give us the tools to make the arguments that need to be made, and with profound and reliable data. That's important. And they educate us, and they just make it easier to be a good citizen.